So today I'm going to be walking through how to make this one shoulder crop top. You can either use this top as it is, or you can combine it with some of my other mix and match patterns to make dresses, jumpsuits, or to just switch out for different sleeves. I've tried to keep everything as beginner friendly as possible, and the pattern is available on my store, which is linked down below. So let's get on with the tutorial. So this is everything that you're going to need for this particular project. You will need a 4-way stretch fabric. This is 95% cotton, 5% elastane, which is the perfect composition for this kind of pattern. You will need a matching thread. You will need some tailor's chalk or fabric pens. I prefer fabric pens when I'm working with stretchy fabric because tailor's chalk can tend to pull on the fabric slightly when you're drawing on it. So I'm using these water-soluble fabric pens. I got these from Amazon. You will need some pins, some fabric scissors or a rotary cutter, and an iron. I'll be using 2 sewing machines for this project. One is a regular sewing machine with zigzag stitch, and one is an overlocker, or you may also know this as a serger. This is optional, so if you don't have one of these, don't worry, it will just make the project a tiny bit easier, but you can do the whole project with a regular machine too. If you're new to sewing with stretch fabrics, I would recommend just having a play about with your settings and finding what's perfect for your stretchy fabric. So normally the main things that I change are the length and the tension, but just have a play around and find what works best for your machine. So this is the pattern for this top. It only has 1 pattern piece, which works as the front and the back. You'll need to cut 4 of these in total, and 2 of those will act as the lining. And for my sleeve, this also only has 1 pattern piece. Mine says cut 2 because I'm using one of my generic patterns, but yours will say cut 1 because obviously we've only got 1 armhole for this particular top. So now you can start to cut your pattern pieces out, but first you need to make sure your fabric is laid out correctly. So you want to find the selvage edge of the fabric, and this is the finished edge. And quite often with this kind of fabric, this kind of jersey, the selvage edge is finished with glue. So you'll be able to feel that it's a lot rougher than your raw edges. You will also see that this edge doesn't roll over like your raw edges. So you can see this edge at the top is a raw edge and it's rolling towards me, whereas this edge at the side is my selvage edge and it's laying nice and flat. So once you've found those selvage edges, you want to fold that fabric with the 2 selvage edges on top of each other, because you'll find that the fabric has 2 of these glued edges. Lay them one on top of the other, so that you've got a selvage edge here and a fold at this side. So now you can start to draw those pattern pieces out, and the only big thing that you need to be aware of is that this grain line down the center of your pattern, and you'll have one on your sleeve as well, just want to make sure that that grain line is parallel to this selvage edge. And as long as you've got that in place, you can draw the pieces out however you want. You also want to bear in mind that because we're cutting out on a fold, we only need to draw the top out twice because we will have double of everything. So I'm going to go ahead and draw out all the pieces that I need, and then I'll show you how things are looking. So I've got my tops drawn out here. I'm going to cut the sleeve out separately because I need that 1 layer of fabric. I would recommend at this point taking some pins and pinning within those lines that you've drawn. That's just going to make sure that the 2 pieces on the 2 layers are as close to identical to each other as possible. So just taking a few pins and pinning within those lines. So once you've got all those pins in place, you can start to cut your pieces out. Just make sure that you're careful to make sure you're not stretching the fabric as you cut, and to make sure that you're always cutting through both layers of the fabric. So now I'm just going to walk through all of the pieces that you should have at this stage once you've cut everything out. So I've got 4 pieces in my top, and for the sleeve you should have 1 piece. So I'm going to start by taking 2 of my 4 top pieces and put the other 2 to one side for now. And I'm going to take my pins and pin along the neckline and along the bottom edge. If you were going to make a jumpsuit or a dress, you want to leave this bottom edge untouched for the whole of the construction. So in that case, you would just do around the neckline. If you want to make a sleeveless version, you can also pin around the armhole. So now you can go in and sew those edges in place. I'm going to use my overlocker, but you can also use a zigzag stitch. So just around that neckline and along that bottom edge. So once those two seams are sewn in place, I've just gone in and repeated that for my remaining two pieces. And I'm going to take this one and turn it to the right side out. And now taking this piece that is the right way out, I'm going to put it inside the one that is still inside out. And just match up all of those corresponding edges. So I'm going to put the strap inside the strap. And the side seams inside the side seams. And once all of those corresponding edges are matched up, I can start to pin the two pieces together. So I'm going to pin along those side seams and along the top of the strap. And once all of those pins are in place, you can go ahead and sew each of those seams. I'm going to use my overlocker again, but you can use a zigzag stitch as well. Just make sure that you're careful with each seam to make sure you're getting all 4 layers. And once those seams are sewn in place, so both the side seams and the top of the straps, you can turn this top to the right side out. I've still got an open armhole, so I can use that to turn the top to the right side out. If you have closed up that armhole and you've also closed up the bottom edge, you'll just need to unpick a small section along that armhole to turn this to the right side out. And now the top itself is mostly done, we just need to add the sleeve. So taking one of my sleeves, I'm just going to fold it with right sides facing together if your fabric has a right and wrong side. And I'm going to pin along that side seam. So just right along here. And once that edge is pinned in place, I'm just going to go and sew along that edge with my overlocker. You can also use a zigzag stitch. And once we've got that seam sewn in place, I'm going to turn this sleeve to the right side out. And then while it's still folded in half, I'm just going to place a pin at the fold along this sleeve cap, because that's going to tell us the center point and make it slightly easier to accurately attach it to the armhole. So just placing a pin like that. And now you can grab your top piece back. So now I'm going to take this sleeve and I'm going to place it inside the armhole of my top. I'm just going to match up the pin that we've just placed at the center of the sleeve cap. I'm going to match up that pin to the top of the strap and pin that in place. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the side seam. So I'm going to match up the side seam of the sleeve to the side seam of the top. And then once you've got those 2 points pinned in place, I'm just going to go in and pin the rest of the way around that armhole and the sleeve cap. Just making sure that you're getting all 3 layers in this armhole, because you'll have 2 for the top and 1 for the sleeve cap. So just pinning all those 3 layers together all the way around that armhole. And once all of those pins are in place, you can go in with an overlocker or a zigzag stitch and sew that armhole in place. Again, just remember to get all 3 layers of your fabric. And now with that sleeve sewn in place, your top should be looking at something like this. You can turn this to the right side out. And now the only thing left to do is to hem that bottom edge of the sleeve. So I personally just like to do this with a single hem. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold that up once and sew it in place with a zigzag stitch. Often if you try and press this with an iron, it will just fold back. So if you do want to be a bit more precise, you can pin your hem in place before you sew it. And this is the part of the project that I would say is most important to just have a little practice on your machine for your hems, because quite often you can find that your hems go a little bit wavy if your machine settings aren't right. So I'm just going to go and do that now. So this is how my hems are looking. I like to sew right along that edge with my zigzag. I feel like it comes out a bit cleaner if you sew right over the top of that edge. And I used a width of 3, a length of 2.5 and a tension of 4. So you can try out those settings or you can find whatever works best for your machine. But other than that, the top is finished.